I am Louis Prusty. I'm the account rep. I cover the Great Lakes region. I was asked to sub for someone who couldn't make it today. Some of you may know Caden Jensen. He couldn't be here today, so I'm here. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about Object First. As Craig mentioned, we are a storage solution purpose-built for Veeam. Any Veeam customers here today? Great. So story is we were actually founded by the same founders of Veeam, Ratmir Timoshev and Andrei Baronev. When they sold Veeam, they created Object First. And that whole decision was based on a lot of, well, basically a big hole in the marketplace. When I first started, and actually and as many of my teammates are, we all used to work at Veeam. And when Ratmir and Andre started Object First, many of us came over. And when I started at Veeam, it was a really great solution. The solution was kind of a reaction to changes that took place in the infrastructure, right? We came from a physical environment to a virtualized environment. And there were great backup solutions in the space. There was Commvaults and ArcServes. And a lot of those were kind of complex and, required a little bit of a team to run. And then when the change happened within the industry where everything moved from a physical environment to a virtualized environment, Veeam really was the first ones to kind of nail that, right? So what they did, in addition to just really getting the virtualized backup space under control, but what they did is, while they were doing that, they made it simple. So, didn't need a huge team to run Veeam, as many of you may know, as compared to some of those legacy backup solutions. So, and it was kind of interesting. And at the time when I worked at Veeam, when I first started there, it just works. That was our motto. It just works. Everything just worked, right? And they ran it simply, and it worked. And what would happen was, whenever I'd go talk to new people, and I remember when I started at Veeam, I'd call around and be like, hey, I'm the new guy, I'm Louis, and I'd run into folks and they'd be like, man, it's like, I have Veeam. It's like, I should probably check and see if that thing's working, right? And inevitably, specifically, I called a guy in the city of Azusa, California. Called him on a Wednesday or whatever it was, and he's like, man, I need to go look at this. He goes, call me back on Friday, I'm curious. So I called him, he goes, man, it just works, right? So, one of the core tenets and values that Ratmir and Andre had at Veeam was, it needs to work, it needs to be simple. A lot of those, same values that they brought over to Object First, it's like we have to have it as simple, we have to have it be very powerful, it has to be capable of running the, requirements of today's data centers, modern data centers, but most importantly, it has to be secure. Craig mentioned it. We work off the zero trust data resiliency policy. We also have zero root to access. So what we do is we segment our backups away from Veeam. So in the event that your Veeam server ultimately gets owned, someone gets in there, gets those credentials, you still can't get into Ootbi. And Tracy will talk more about that. She's my technical counterpart. You don't want me doing that. So, and that's ultimately what it is. It's just a simple, it's a powerful, secure solution created by the guys at Veeam because there was a hole in the marketplace for it. I remember when I started at Veeam, there were starting to be some other players emerging, right? The Rubrics and Cohesities, and it was always, hey, do you guys do immutability? Do immutability? One of the things that we did was, like, technically, yeah, we can. We have the ability for you, the customer, to spin up a Linux hardened repository. You get to manage it, you get to deal with it. And I dealt with SLED customers, state and local and education. And there was not always like a ton of folks on staff who may have had Linux expertise. And especially in that SLED space, I'd always talk to guys like, yeah, I used to have a team of 15 people, now I'm down to 6. And a lot of times those recs would remain open. So there may be somebody there today who knows Linux, but if that person leaves, then what, right? So what we'll do, and Tracy will get into this more, is, we provide a hardened repository, out of the box immutable in 15 minutes, simple and secure. And that's it in a nutshell. And we'll keep this conversational, so if there's any questions that come up at any time, just jump right in there and say, hey, Tracy will be glad to answer them. Don't look at me, all right? And with that, I'd like to introduce Tracy Chea.
Hi, all. Nice to meet y'all. Happy to be here and tell you guys a little bit of our product. We call it, sorry, didn't mean to hit that button. We call it Ootbi. It's an acronym that stands for out-of-the-box immutability. But before we get into that, a little bit of the background behind why backups became really important. A little bit of the statistics here. 93% of ransomware attacks target the backup. Why? That's because that is your last line of defense. If something were to happen to your data, if threat actors got into your backups, how are you going to recover that data? And that's basically why they attack it. It happens every 11 seconds. And Veeam is a Magic Quadrant leader for 2023. However, the complexity of managing storage infrastructure is something that a lot of Veeam admins have come to us and told us about. Hey, we want something with immutability, but with immutability, sometimes it's hard to manage whether we have Linux expertise or things like that, or if we're sending that data into the cloud. Yes, it's immutable, but if something were to happen, how long is it going to take for us to bring that data back from the cloud? So what our Veeam customers wanted was something that was secure, simple, and powerful, but with existing solutions today, they realized they could probably have two of the three, but not all three. Say you had something that was powerful and simple, but sometimes that's not the most secure, and vice versa. So Ootbi provides all three. It's secure, simple, and powerful, and we'll go into detail about that in a little bit. A little bit about the different kinds of backups from the last slide. In terms of direct attached storage, that's something that we see most often. It's powerful, it's simple, but it's often not the most secure. There's no immutability by default. If you were to set that up, that's pretty proprietary, and you would have to set it up on your own. With dedupe appliances, they can be super powerful, but probably not the easiest to manage. In terms of those dedupe appliances, say you wanted something that had deep storage, you want to save data for a long time, that's what they'd be really good for. The immutability is probably proprietary to the organization, and they would have to help you set that up. Same with the hardened Linux operating system or the repository. You create that on your own. You can follow the examples that Veeam provide for you, but in terms of managing it, say a zero-day attack, you need to have that Linux expertise to update that on your own, which leads us into Ootbi, and then we'll go into detail about that here. But yes, Ootbi is an acronym that stands for out-of-the-box immutability. I promise it gets easier to say the more that you say it, and there's a cute little logo attached to it. But we are built on three main pillars. That's secure, simple, and powerful. In terms of security, in addition to being immutable out of the box, we follow these zero trust, zero access principles, meaning there's no root nor command line access. Not even a backup administrator can go in and delete any of the backups stored onto one of our nodes. We're simple to use. It takes as little as 15 minutes to rack, stack, and deploy. And because we are purpose-built for Veeam, there's no extra configurations that you guys would need to make. We actually suggest that you use Veeam's defaults, including their dedupe, compression, as well as their encryption. And we're powerful with ingest speeds up to 4 gigabytes per second, and that's leveraging their SOS API that's come out with the release of VBR version 12. This is what allows for the automatic load balancing across the NICs, the use of an NVMe flash cache, as well as our capacity monitoring. So where do we typically see ourselves within a backup infrastructure? We see ourselves as a primary target backup appliance for all of your Veeam backups. That way you can leverage the immutability with S3 native object lock, as well as the instant VM recoveries. From there, we see you tiering off your data either into a secondary location or into the cloud for long-term retention. This way, you're really following Veeam's 3-2-1 ransomware-proof policy, where you have 3 copies of your data on 2 different media types, one of which being object first, and then having your offsite copy, whether it is that cloud or if you guys are using a secondary location. Going a little bit deeper into our 3 core pillars here, Ootbi is secure. We're using S3 native immutability. On top of that, like Louis alluded to earlier, we're using that zero trust data resiliency principles, where honestly what it means is in the name. Trust nobody, verify they are who they say they are before you allow them access into your environment. And we're utilizing that hardened Linux operating system, so keeping it pretty secure there. In terms of simplicity, there's no Linux expertise required. We manage the updates to the operating system as well as our software for you. And because of that purpose-built solution for Veeam, you don't need to go into your jobs, into that configuration, and edit anything there. As soon as you create that job, you don't need to change anything. Just point your backups to Ootbi itself. And for the powerfulness, we support up to 20 instant VM recoveries per node. So we do scale into a cluster. That'll come up within the next slide here. That allows ingest speeds up to 4 gigabytes per second. And then it's engineered explicitly for Veeam, so there's no extra configurations. We allow Veeam to do what they do best, and we're just that storage for them. They'll do that data movement and that management for you. In terms of scaling, we do scale up to 4 nodes per cluster. So we have 3 different size nodes. They're 64, 128, as well as 192 terabytes. They each come with 1 gigabyte per second of performance speeds. In this example here, we're using our 128 terabyte node. Say you needed more capacity or wanted better performance speeds. By adding a second node, you're doubling that capacity as well as the performance, similar to adding a third, as well as a 4th node. In that 4-node cluster, you'll get up to half a petabyte of usable capacity, as well as 4 gigabytes per second of performance speeds. If you look at the graph to the left, you'll see that the performance and capacity increases linearly as the management overhead remains constant. That's because every time you add a new node to the cluster, you're only managing and maintaining that one cluster. But that just leaves me with, when you think about Veeam, think about object first. We're secure, simple, and powerful. I know it's really redundant, but I mean, that's the power of backups, right? But yeah, open to any questions if you guys have any.
Thank you, Tracy. So the simplicity thing is something that rings true throughout everything we do, right? Again, to Tracy said, we like a long time, and we just provide a simple storage solution that locks down, easy to manage, easy to install, and easy to run. So with that, that's what we have. Are there any questions that Tracy can answer for you? So is everybody here, are you all on the latest version of Veeam? Or at least on 12? Because as Tracy mentioned, we leveraged the API that came out in version 12. It's called the SOS API, and that's pretty much where a lot of our secret sauce happens. She mentioned kind of performance. We have dual NICs on our appliance. Veeam recognizes that there are 2 NICs and will automatically load balance across those 2 NICs to increase the ingest speeds, and then that'll hit our our performance tier or our first drive within the box, and then we've got other spinning disks in the back of the box that will take the data and let it live there for the remainder of the retention policy period. So that kind of helps, but really that API that came out in version 12 is really kind of what unlocked the performance of the box for us. And outside of that, that's what we have. So if there are any questions, we've got the booth, we've got some tchotchkes and some giveaways over there. Please stop by. We have a raffle going as well, and answer any questions you may have throughout the day. Thank you.